Also, we have our guest speaker this morning, Professor Alex Eze, who will be duly introduced by the DVC RID, Professor Akiemi. You are welcome, sir, Professor Alex. There's also on the high table is the Deputy Provost of the PG College, Professor Raphael Okonji. You are welcome, sir. Yes, we want to appreciate those that are online. You are all well recognized. And those that are in our midst, we'll be expecting more people as this program starts this morning. So without any waste of our time, I would like to give the mic to the Provost, Professor Ile Somi, for his welcome address.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
The Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research, Foundation and Development, Professor A.I. Kenny, you're welcome, sir. All of the members of the board, those who are here, and those who are online, you're welcome. The Deputy Provost, Postgraduate College, Professor Ari Okoji, you're highly welcome. The Director Central Office of Research, Professor Fadi, thank you for coming, sir. All other members of the PG board, distinguished academics, esteemed supervisors, most of who are online, academic colleagues, postgraduate students particularly our doctoral candidates, most of who are online. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the postgraduate college, I welcome you all to visit Professor Alex Eze. Thank you, sir. That on behalf of the excellent training. And we are privileged to have as our guide one of the most accomplished scholars of our time. It gives me, therefore, great pleasure and it gives us a pride on behalf of the Postgraduate College to warmly welcome our guest speaker, Professor Alex Eze, to this important interactive session on the theme, strengthening scholarship and grantsmanship for postgraduate.
Professor Eze needs little introduction to this audience, but permit me to say a few words. A Donsive Professor of Global Health at the Donsive School of Public Health, Professor Eze is a global leader whose career has redefined the interface between rigorous scholarship, policy influence, and institution building. As the founding executive director of the African Population and Health Research Center, APHRC, he transformed an idea into a world-class research and placed African science at the center of global health discourse. He is a thought leader on population dynamics, urban health, and research capacity strengthening. Professor Eze is a recipient of numerous global honors and above all, a mentor whose commitment to the next generation of scholars has remained unwavering. Dear Professor, a wealth of experience with our academic community. Your distinguished scholarship, leadership in global health, extensive experience in postgraduate training, and contributions to research and capacity development make you exceptionally well placed to engage with us on the critical issues before us today. Your presence here also signals your continued investment in the ecosystem that you have helped to build across the continent and beyond. We are deeply grateful. Now, we have more in the days we are in. We have more postgraduate students than ever before, more data, more tools, and more urgent problems for research to solve. Yet, funding is becoming more competitive, journals are more demanding, and impact is more scrutinized. It's no longer enough to have a good research idea. Postgraduate training must now deliberately produce scholars who can articulate a compelling question, design a feasible study, execute it with methodological rigor, write it with clarity, and communicate its value to funders, policymakers, and the public. That is, scholarship and grantsmanship. At the Postgraduate College, we recognize that the quality of postgraduate education extends beyond the successful completion of coursework, examinations, dissertations, and theses. A strong postgraduate environment must cultivate scholars who are able to identify important research questions, generate rigorous and relevant evidence, communicate their findings effectively, collaborate across disciplines, and compete successfully for research funding. In this regard, scholarship and grantsmanship they're no longer peripheral skills. They're central to building sustainable research careers and strengthening institutions. Please join me in giving Professor Alex Eze a very warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, Professor Elesomi, for that thought-provoking welcome address. In continuation of this program this morning, I would like to invite our DVC Research, Innovation and Development, Professor Akinyemi, for the introduction of the guest. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, MC, the Vice Dean, Faculty of Science. Thank you so much. First, a big greetings from the Vice Chancellor, who would have loved to be here himself, but who needs to travel on official duty. So, Professor, let's say the Vice Chancellor, Professor Adebayo Simi send his personal greetings. He would have loved to be here himself. The Provost of Postgraduate College, Professor Elesomi, thank you so much for all that you do for the university. We want to sincerely appreciate you. And also to your Vice and the Postgraduate Board, we can see a lot of innovation that you have brought. So we want to sincerely appreciate you. Also to thank you for lobbying that Professor Alex will be with you during this short visit. My boss in the office, Professor Gideodu, thank you so much. Thank you for all that you do, and thank you also for all the support you have given for Professor Alex's visit this time around. So the board members who are here, Postgraduate Board, I want to greet all, and those who have joined us online. I also learned that we have a lot of audience across Nigeria and also even beyond Nigeria. So we want to welcome you all. Currently we have about 40 participants online. We want to welcome you. And my bosses from the Central Office of Research and from Intecu, thank you for providing this support for this. My role is to introduce a great mentor, Professor Alex Eze, but please permit me to just make a few remarks, even before I go to Professor Alex Eze, to say that university should not continue, particularly in Nigeria, that we are burdened with a lot of challenges, to continue to be a curriculum university where our focus is just teaching. So OAU, within these last 4 or 5 years, will be very intentional in trying to provide another course towards transitioning from a teaching intense university to a research intense university. And with that, of course, we know that there are a lot of things that will change within the system. And the bedrock of that transitioning is the Postgraduate College. And I must again sincerely appreciate Professor Elesomi, not just Professor Elesomi, let me say all the previous provosts that we've had in that place. But I've worked very closely with the last 3 provosts before Professor Elesomi. And I must say, I really want to appreciate them for their understanding of this and the roles they've played in doing that. So in that effort, we've tried to change many things, and one of those things was to make sure that we strengthen the postgraduate system, in a way that our research will not just be research for research alone, but research that has impact, within our immediate society, and impact that also leads to development of the nation. One of those major things that we have done, therefore, is to see how we reshape the postgraduate training, particularly the PhD. And I'm not yet introducing Professor Alex, but again to thank you for your initiative, because through our thinking, we got to a stage that we saw a lot of issues with our PhD program, and some of us came together to write a very strong proposal, not to discredit the system, but to look into ways that we can help to strengthen that initiative. And then we submitted it to one of the initiative of Professor Alex Eze, and we got $100,000. That is what led to this intro. So if you're on the URM, I'm telling you the story of the URM today. That is what birthed the URM. The PG handbook that we have was as a result of that $100,000. That we now teach a research methodology at PhD level was as a result of that. I just mentioned that to say that as we continue to drive as a university towards moving towards that research intense university, there's a man that we must celebrate. There's a man that we must identify his contribution, not just to OAU, not just to Nigeria, but to many African universities, because he has provided, in his own little way, thinking on his bed, on his chair, on how this can happen across Africa. And that's the person of Professor Alex Eze. Professor Alex Eze many years ago conceived the idea that PhD students in Africa to be able to compete with their colleagues all over the world. And in his own little way, he was able to attract grants that supported PhD students then, the one we call the ADDRF. Please, I hope I'm correct, sir. So, I don't know the full meaning because I did not receive any grant from ADDRF, but one day he invited me to review. I think he invited me to a meeting in Nairobi then to join the review process of the ADDRF. And we thought that was the best thing that could happen. But then he came with this idea also of Qatar, because some people don't know the history of Qatar. Qatar came from Alex dining table thinking to himself. And then from there, so Alex was not part of Qatar. Alex was the initiator of Qatar, because I need to make that very profound statement. So if you have benefited from Qatar, Alex don't want to really talk about. I don't want to talk about his other things, about his brilliance in academics. For me, that is not what is relevant today. And just to say that he has given his life, to promoting scholarship in Africa. He's not a scholar that we celebrate just by his publication, but if you want to also contest with his publication, you're on your own. Because Lancet has a special commission on him as a person. So I don't know what you want again. They did not just ask him to write. They wrote Alex, the son of a palm wine tapper. I think you will also tell us about that story, why they use palm wine tapper. Yes, sir. But that son of a palm wine tapper has done a lot in shaping postgraduate training across Africa. And I'm happy that Qatar fellows are here. Through his initiative, let me now narrow it down to OAU. I think we have more than 30 Qatar fellows from OAU. More than 30. And each one of you have benefited more than $100,000. So if we make it a conservative estimate that they are just 30, and that they've only benefited the $100,000. So how much has it given to OAU? That's $3 million. I think we will clap. Yeah. But Alex thinking is not just about promoting scholarship, it's about overall strengthening of his system. And it's not just to those who are doing PhD for the Qatar alone. You also think within him to say, well, you cannot excel in academics if the system that supports you if they are frauds, with all kinds of challenges. So he also provided opportunity for those who support PhD training in the bursary, in the registry, in the library. Every year, they invite them for training outside the country, fully paid, where they sit down with them and on those very basic things to make PhD training in Africa, to make it seamless and also to make it to be able to compete favorably with its mates abroad. He just came on holiday, and that's but when he told me that he will be around, I just want to visit. I told the VC. The VC said, no, 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 he's not coming on a friendly level. That we should make it an official visit to the university. And so we called the provost. I think we said we are in a meeting, and he jumped immediately, to our office. They want to be part of the committee that we host him. So, and he struggled to get today. He did that. He will talk to not just the board, but also to the students. And I'm aware that many people also joined across Nigeria and Africa. So therefore, it's my singular honor to you bring to the podium Professor Alex, who I'm proud to say is my own personal mentor, and a man who has committed himself to not just scholarship by just doing scholarship, but who has committed his life to scholarship by strengthening the system across Africa. So, Prof, it's my singular honor, therefore, to give you the mic. Thank you so much, sir.
It's okay. I think it's fine. They both can pick up. Checking those online. Can they hear me? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Lesami, and thank you, Professor Akani. I prefer to go by first names. It's a pleasure to be here. I feel very spoiled by OAU, and I just want to appreciate the VC and all the principal officers of the university for your hospitality. I feel like this is a second home for me in many ways, and every time I come to OAU, I'm amazed at the change that is happening. And I really want to congratulate Professor Kiyami for the Central Office of Research and what he's been doing and accomplishing over the years. And just want to thank you again for the invitation to be here and to be able to interact with different groups within the university. For today, I was told that I'm going to have an interactive session with doctoral students here. And whatever I've prepared to speak, the goal was to have very few points to provoke a conversation and then have an open discussion with the doctoral students. And if there will be time at some point, I would want to also meet with them to look at, for those who are struggling to think about how to formulate their research ideas and how to go about carrying it forward. And that's one of the things I love to do with doctoral students, where you think through your ideas and the things that you want to work on and research on and turn it into something that becomes a tangible research project that you can easily explain to your grandmother who never went to school and why it is important to do such work. And if there is no, but for today, it's really around how do we strengthen scholarship and grantsmanship for postgraduate training. And when you think about it generally, you are looking at both individual responsibilities for the doctoral students, as well as institutional responsibility on for supporting training. But it's not just institutional responsibility. It's also about understanding the whole ecosystem of support that is needed for doctoral training to take place. Doctoral training by default is a research degree. And you really cannot do research in a vacuum. It has to be anchored within an existing research system or enterprise that you are nested within and you can grow. A lot of things about research, you can sit in the classroom and learn about research methods and all the analytical techniques and all that. Until you open your Stata or SPSS or SAS or whatever you use to do your R or whatever you use to do your research, you never know it. You can sit around and learn all about all the methods that you can use to do research until you've actually gone to the field to collect data and see how messy data could be. You never really get it. So we learn to do research by doing it. It's not something we sit in a classroom to learn. And for doctoral students, it's really where you have the opportunity to make mistakes and to learn and to grow and to come out better than those who are teaching you research and research methods. So the structure of this conversation this afternoon is really, or this morning, is more around conversation and discussions. But I understand a lot of our doctoral students are online, and it's very difficult to have interactive session online. And so we'll see how that goes. Because when I started, if I could go to the next slide, when I started, one of the things I wanted to do is to have a pulse check, understand who is actually here, particularly how many of the people participating in this particular session are doctoral students, how they are funded, whether they are fully funded, partially funded, not funded at all. Because if you understand how they are currently funded and supported, and then it's easy to begin to think, how can you then strengthen those systems that can support scholarship and grantsmanship? And we can know where, for those who are funded, where their funding is coming from, how much of it are domestic, from within Nigeria, how much of it is coming from outside of Nigeria. And if we understand all of those, then it makes it easier to then begin to have a meaningful conversation around how we can strengthen scholarship and grantsmanship for postgraduate training. Why does this matter? I think it matters because generally, doctoral training, when you think about education and educational levels, there is something that's called returns on investment in education. And there are economists, I don't know if there are any of them here, talk about private returns and public returns to education, to investments in education. Private returns are the things you gain as an individual by going to school. You can get a good job, you can get better life skills, you can get connections, you can do, and you look at the cost of going to school, not just what you pay, but the foregone opportunities for you attending school for how many years it is. And then the public returns are more of the social values and the society gains by people getting educated. Why do we have free primary and secondary education or basic education? We have basic education funded by governments and countries because the returns, the social returns to basic education is much larger than the private returns to education. If you don't have an educated population, there's a lot you lose, particularly in today's global knowledge systems. So we invest in these things. But when you look at tertiary education, that's bachelor's, master's, and PhD. Bachelor's has one of the largest private returns. And that's why many societies, people pay to get a degree. Master's also has a huge personal private returns on the investments you make to get a master's degree. But at the PhD level, has the lowest private returns. So in essence, the public returns to education, to doctoral training, is much larger, particularly when there are systems that support innovation and creativity and all those that then the doctoral training can bring and create new knowledge economy that many societies thrive on. So in that sense then, if the public returns to doctoral training is much larger than what you get as a private return to that investment, no one should be doing their PhD from their pocket. You should not be paying to get a PhD because it does not benefit you as much as a person than it benefits society. So if we do not pay to get doctoral training, how then do we support that ecosystem that will produce great scientists and scholars and researchers? And that's really what I wanted to talk about. And that's the premise of this conversation this afternoon, to understand that indeed societies benefit a lot more from somebody training as getting a PhD. If you want to be a billionaire and you want to do it through a PhD process, unless somehow you come out and you go into industry and not research and academia, good luck on that. Because you can do a lot more, especially if you're doing the terminal masters, MBA and all those, you can get far with that. But when you do a PhD, it's a commitment to a certain type of life and vision and things that benefits a lot more people. With your PhD, if you get an academic, how many more people can you train and replicate and produce and order? That's a public return on that investment. And that's why it is important that as a society and as a people, we actually have a way to support the system that can produce these types of people. So that's really the premise of what I want to talk about this afternoon. We can go to the next slide, please. So the question then is, how do we fund PhD programs? I think the starting point is the recognition of the centrality of research to national development. If we don't understand that, then we can never value doctoral training unless we know how critical, how central, how important doctoral research is in itself to national development. That if we cannot generate our own research and our own knowledge and our own knowledge systems, that our ability to develop as a country, as a continent, and all that will be greatly undermined and compromised. We are currently in a knowledge economy, and knowledge defines a lot of. You can think about it. How many of the big, richest people on earth today have oil fields and gold mines and all of those? What is the source of their wealth? You can think about all the African leaders that stole national wealth and resources, and you ask yourself, what is their net worth when they die? You can count them in single digits of billions. But there are people that are $200 billion, $300 billion, and where is that coming? The knowledge economy is boundless. And so if we understand the centrality of research to national development, then it creates a platform for a conversation and a discussion on how we fund and drive that type of that aspect of our training programs. And the second is the need to actively advocate for domestic funding for research. I don't think there's any time than the current period where that need is most crucial and critical. That previously, much of the research we do in Africa has been underwritten by external funding sources. That can never drive local and domestic development, because those external funds come to address priorities that has been set by whoever the funders are. And if we have our own funding systems and mechanisms, we can then define priorities that matter to us and to our development. And we can then think of ways to invest in those. And we need to be able to demonstrate the value of research. I think these are the points I would like to zero in on, those 3 points. And then maybe I will end with some tips for doctoral students on what roles you could play and do as you go through this conversation this afternoon. Can we go to the next slide, please? So globally, you can look at countries in terms of their GDP and correlate it with their levels of research productivity or the levels of investment in research and development as as a fraction of their GDP, as a percent of their GDP. And there's a very strong positive correlation there. The countries with the rich countries are also the countries that have very strong research ecosystem, and they also invest in research. And you can, there are across the board, this is looking at biomedical science, you can look at every other aspect of research, and there is a very positive correlation between research outputs in this space and GDP per capita. Actually, this is gross domestic product, GDP overall. So, as you look at this, the point I want to make is that that relationship is there, and if we are thinking of growing our GDP per capita, then investment in research can become one of those avenues. And it's not just, can we go to the next slide, please? To think about it and to fully understand the role of research, I think these are dated, but I think the principles that are being highlighted here are still critical and important today. Watson in 2003 talked about development, that it will increasingly, development will increasingly depend on a country's ability to understand, interpret, produce, use, diffuse, and commercialize scientific and technological knowledge in ways that are appropriate to its culture, generations, and levels of development. And Sharon, who is the Deputy Director of Qatar Program at from Wits University, talked about that fundamental to the generation of appropriate solutions for Africa, for health and development in Africa is research that is conceptualized, conducted, analyzed, and published by Africans in Africa. It is not somebody else in North America or in Europe or in Asia that is going to find solutions to the challenges that we face in Africa. And if we're going to find those challenges, then we need to be able to undertake research. Many times we think research is expensive, and truly, research is expensive, is an expensive undertaking. But if we go to the next slide, it will be this research as key to social development. There are a number of people, actually, I will go to the next slide and I come back. No, okay, sorry, stay here. You look at the third bullet there, talks about that no country, this was the Indian, I think it was the Indian Prime Minister Nehru that talked about the fact that because we are poor, because we are a poor country, we cannot afford not to do research. Sometimes we think that we can't afford to do research because we are poor. And because we don't have money, that's why we cannot invest in research. He is saying it is because we are poor that we cannot afford not to do it, not to invest in it. Because we need to be able to find ways to invest the limited resources we have in what promises to give us the greatest value. The former Prime Minister of Mozambique once said that, that Africa cannot afford not to invest in research. It's not a question of how rich or poor we are. Even the poorer countries, there are very poor countries that invest in research, and research can become a catalyst for economic growth and development. If you look at some of the group we think about as Asian tigers, and you can actually track their growth between 1975 and 1995 to how much they invested in research and development. And sometimes you can actually map that the level of growth or the rate of socioeconomic growth in these countries are proportional to the level of increase and change in their investments in research and development. A place like South Korea, their level of investment in research and development grew at a rate of 23% annually between 1975 and 1995. What does that mean? At a rate of 23%, it means that every 3 years, they doubled their investment in research and development. Every 3 years. Means if they put 10 billion in research and development this year, in 3 years, they're putting 20 billion In 6 years, they are putting 40 billion. In 9 years, they are putting 80 billion into this. That's the rate of growth of that over this 20-year period. So, in essence, then, if we must make progress as a country and as a nation, then investment in research is not a luxury. It is a necessary condition for development. And doctoral training is an integral part of that, and I'll get to that in a moment. Next slide, please. And this should be looking at in Africa. However, I think we look at the statistics, and you can only sometimes get discouraged at what some of the where things are on the continent. If you take away South Africa from the equation for sub-Saharan Africa, the last statistics I saw that on average we are putting in about 0.2% of our we contribute only 0.2% for the global global expenditure on research and development. That's almost negligible. So if you think about all the money that is spent in research and development globally, what is the contribution for us as Africa? 0.2%. There are countries that have begun to address this. Countries like Kenya, and we'll get to it in a moment. Countries like Tunisia, Rwanda, they are making significant progress. And Senegal is also coming up in those respects. And these countries are trying to recognize the importance of such investments, and they are making progress. For us as a country in Nigeria, we're still at about 0.2% and all that. And so what does this mean? If we then contribute so little of domestic investments in research and development, when we have those low levels of investment, it actually creates weak environment for research and for innovation and for training and human capacity development. We cannot, you cannot do a lot with that level of investment, and so it makes it then harder for you to break the cycle of poverty. So at the end of the day, the question here is, if this is the situation, how do we move from here to a place where we can actually be able to leverage the resources, particularly domestic resources we need for research? Okay. So the next slide, please. If you look at the statistics I gave you before, this is what it translates to in terms of research and development results on the continent. And in terms of publications, you can see those in terms of global citations, patents, expenditure in research and development, the number of researchers, percent of researchers in the world that are here, and the investments that we spent on research and development on the continent. You can compare that to where we are as in terms of space and land area, about 20% of the global land mass. We are 24% of the global population and growing to 36% by, before the end of this century. We are becoming almost 2 in 5 people in the world will be here. And we're only accounting for 2%, 3% of the investments in research and development. That's a recipe for disaster. So, can you go to the next slide? With so little local funding, how do we then build strong and sustainable postgraduate training programs? I think that's really, I painted this context to just underscore the battle that is ahead of us, the importance of thinking about these things and thinking about the ways we can move forward to actually make this, create a change in this landscape. Next slide, please. So one of the things we must do is to change domestic funding landscape for research and development, because you cannot strengthen doctoral scholar training and postgraduate training if we do not strengthen research activities and funding and all that at our universities. How do we do this? First of all, is to recognize that you cannot depend on the National Assembly to change it on their own. You can't expect Abuja to change this situation by themselves. And it cannot happen by chance. It must be such that there is a structured, coordinated strategy to address the problem. And that rests with universities and research institutes. I'll give you an example of what happened in Kenya. Kenya was almost at the same level as Nigeria and many other African countries. And there was national conversation and discussions around investments in research. And part of the challenge we threw is that if there is a budget reading in parliament, why can't we have 1,000 doctoral students? The last I checked on Google and realized there's over 300 and 28 universities in Nigeria, and about 75, more than 75% of them have, 75 of them have doctoral training programs, PhD programs, and there's over 20,000 registered PhDs in Nigeria. 1,000 of them is like 5%. 2,000 of them is 10%. Is there a way to mobilize 2,000 doctoral students whenever there is a budget reading in Parliament, in the National Assembly, to be there and demand for a budget line for research and development? That's how the National Research Foundation in Kenya was. Actually, the Parliament passed a law to say that they will put 2% of their GDP. I don't think they understood what they were saying, but they passed that 2% of GDP to research. Now they are close to getting to 1%. But it has increased the level of fund almost fivefold or more than fivefold in the country. But it took action. Universities used to be the centers of national consciousness, where we raise questions about things that are not going right and how they can be changed. But currently, it looks like everybody is on a survival mode. And with that approach, we cannot truly change these things. We need to move away from that mode that it's like we think nothing can happen. Something can happen. In activism still works. And as academics, universities have been the center for activism, where we challenge corruption, where we challenge ineptitude, everything that is now. But today, somebody who doesn't even have a master's degree can be a director in one national office and comes here and tells us how to run your doctoral training program. It should not be that. And so we see here that if actually we create a coalition and strategy that can promote some level of advocacy within universities, could be faculty members. It's not just doctoral students that will say, okay, if there is, we need to demand that there is a national a strategy for investments in research and development. Yes, state fund might be there. They'll tell you that is it. But what is it funding? And that's another thing. You can then think about how do you even reform existing instruments that are there so that there can be a clear strategy on how we invest in graduate training. It should not be that most of our doctoral training programs and funding that exist are coming from outside, because they will only be in those defined fields where they are interested in. Maybe it is public health, maybe it's sexual and reproductive health, maybe it's HIV/AIDS, maybe it is X or Y or Z. What of all the other areas where we have training programs in? How do we support them? That's where a national strategy becomes very important and clear. And we can find ways to reform these existing. We can negotiate with, let's say, the debt fund. How does it create a program that can support doctoral training? And I mean, think about it. They fund PhDs. And if you're doing your PhD outside Nigeria, I understand you get something like 24, 25 million naira to go do your PhD outside. If you're doing it in Nigeria, you get 1 million. Why? You can make all the arguments you like, but at the end of the day, what does that 1 million? It just tells you that doing your research locally is what is 1% of 25? It's very insignificant. Is that what it takes? And those things would need to be challenged. Those things will need to be changed. And then we think about a clear strategy on how do we support and fund doctors. You might identify 10 universities, 15, 20 universities out of the 78 or 76 federal universities and whatever, how many 70-something state universities who will run these programs in ways that you can create and support the faculty for the remaining 328 universities that are there in the country. But it needs to be invested in. South Africa does well. I think when this recent Trump crisis happened and the NIH was supporting many doctoral training programs in South Africa, and all of a sudden many of those grants were cut. Next university I know of went to the government, the Department of Education or Higher Education and all that, and negotiated for a replacement funding for those PhD students so they can complete their training. We have the resources. We can do better. And in many other countries, those people, some of them may have dropped out. Some of them are struggling to finish their PhDs, simply because somebody woke up one morning and felt that you are no longer worth investing in. And we take it that way. So let's think about how do we reform existing systems and be able to fund a graduate training. And the private sector is really an area that higher education institutions and systems in Nigeria, in Nigeria, most of Africa have not tapped into. In the last 2 days, I've been talking with Professor Akinyemi, and it's been amazing some of the things he's trying to do to the Central Office of Research, in tapping into some of your alumni networks and all that, in bringing some levels of resources that you've not been able to tap into in the past. There are huge, but you need a strategy. And you need a vision of how those things could be done. You might say, okay, what can I do as a doctoral student? And all the things I'm talking about are system level changes and things, but they are important because they are the things that create the enabling environment for these doctoral training programs and postgraduate training to take place. If we don't have that, then we don't have very strong research systems where these training programs can be embedded. Can we go to the next slide, please? The last thing I feel that we have to do, even if we do all the rest and we begin to see some results and movements in terms of investments, local investments or domestic investments in research and development, then we need to be able to demonstrate the value of research and make it clear that actually research is bringing in value beyond the investments, that the return on investment in research is 10 times more, or whatever it is that we're able to demonstrate that. And how do we do that? I think if we want to sustain those investments going forward, it's being able to demonstrate that value of the investment. And there are ways we can do that. It's thinking about how do we go beyond academic publishing, and we can get the research and do the collect the data, or do the lab work, and we write the papers and we publish them in the top journals. That's great and excellent. But if that's all we do with our research, then the country and the nation does not see the value of that research. They don't read your peer-reviewed publications in science and nature and all those. They don't read them. They look for how do we bring innovations to the things we've been doing. I go to my village, and the way we farmed when I was 6 years old and 10 years old is the same way we're still farming today. Why? And we have departments of agriculture in almost all the universities here. We have departments of technology, engineering, and all that. Why cannot we find ways that subsistence farmers can improve their agricultural yield, make it less labor intensive, create basic little technologies that can actually support them and make life easier? Innovation is about finding solutions to local challenges and problems that we have. If we continue to do the same thing that we've done for 30, 40 years, and we've had challenges doing, we are not showing the value of those investments. So our research must move beyond those. It must get into think about how we create those patents and protect them and license them and find ways to do product prototyping where we create basic new technologies that can solve local problems. And we have to think about ways we engage with industries and lead these innovations to become commercial products that people can then relate. When we do this, then the system that is investing in this research and development begins to see the value of that, and they will not move back from doing those investments. So if we are going to sustain that, one is to make sure that we do what is necessary and essential to create that, to enable and catalyze local investments in research and development. And then how do we sustain it going forward? And I think when we move our research beyond publications through a lot of these other strategies, we're able to do that and achieve that. Okay. Next slide, please. I think that's what I really wanted to share with just as a general principle that can then stimulate maybe conversations and discussions around some of these. But for doctoral students, maybe those who are online or might be here in person, is thinking about how do you develop a strong research career? I believe that anybody wanting to do a PhD, either you're in academia or you're interested in research, you want to get into academia, and and that means that you are very interested in research to be able to do a PhD. If you're going to do this, one of the basic things to understand is that research and growth and developing a strong research career is like every other aspect of life, and that you have to grow in it, and you become better by doing it. It's not something that you can cut corners and get ahead quickly. And part of what I talk about when I talk about natural growth principles is that you don't just give birth to a baby and the baby starts running the same day that they were born. They first need to learn how to keep their head up, learn to sit, learn to crawl, learn to stand, learn to take their first step. And then they can try to compete with Usain Bolt or whoever the fastest runner in the world is today. But you don't start off there. So what do? You need to be able to then learn those steps. And through that, the mentors that you have and all that, you can definitely grow in that space. But it's not places where people cut corners easily. You need to go through the trenches to really develop the discipline and the skill set that is needed for this. And some of the things that really derail many people is what I call the lure and the trappings of power and money. Many people, you learn one skill and how to analyze data. You're advertising it everywhere for people to pay you to analyze it. As you start analyzing people's data, your own ideas go away because you are there for. And some others is position. You think, okay, this position will give me that, and take that position, and by the time you're in it 2-3 years, research is gone through the roof. And so many times it's difficult to get back to those things. So you have to be careful. You have to be able to understand what it is that actually you're about, and then be able to weigh in that it's money is not everything. Positions is not, they are not everything. And if you are able to stay true to basic principles that can guide you through this, you can become a great researcher. The other thing is, for some people who think that they can do it all alone, research, even for anthropologists and for historians and all that, who may work on their own and all that, there's so much you can do by yourself. But think about it, the more you are able to collaborate and the more you're able to do with other people, you can triple and quadruple your output and productivity in research. So it is important that you collaborate. No man can be an island. You don't know it. You might be a great at literature reviews and in qualitative research, but you suck in quantitative research. But some of the questions you have may need mixed methods, where you need somebody with that expertise. If you collaborate with them, you're able to leverage those, and you're able to do a much more exciting and interesting research. So it is important to recognize you in this space. To really grow, you need partnerships, you need to collaborate. And sometimes we think that credits are unfair. And in my years at APHRC, I saw this a lot, where people come in as postdocs, and you give them data sets and questions and things to do. and they complain, oh, this person didn't contribute anything, but they are a senior author or the PI, and they forget that that person got the proposal, that got the money, that got that grant, they had the idea that generated those resources. These same people, in 5, 6, 7 years, they now have postdocs around them. And let's think of these postdocs, you just give them this, they think it is their ideas. Where you are, the way you see things can be very different. When you move to the next level, you realize, they're the two sides of the coin, that it's just perspectives. And what you consider unfair today, tomorrow, you actually consider it on almost 100%, 180 degrees change on those. So think about it. You're only seeing this from your own perspective. Even if you think it is unfair, you're the third author in that, you're the fourth author, whatever it is, your name is on that publication. And it matters. Avoid avoid crabs in a bucket mentality. And for me, that's really, you say you put 20 crabs in a bucket and you leave it open. You can go away for 2, 3 days and come back, they are still there. Because anyone that tries to come up, the others drag it down because they're also trying to come up. You never allow the others to go around. We know how to pull each other down, not how to help the others. You can become generous. I think the good book says there is the person that withholds more and tends to become very poor. And there are those who are liberal and gives and they prosper. And when we are liberal and with whatever we have and whatever ideas and all that, we can grow and we can become better. I hear in medicine, they tell you hear one or learn one, you watch one or see one, and you do one, then you're learning and getting there. And in this place, we need to learn that by facilitating others to grow, we are also growing. In the Kata program, that some of you know, one of the first people we celebrated was a doctoral student from Malawi who was doing his PhD at VIT and went back to University of Malawi to collect his data, but found a student there to become their research assistant who was a master's student. And the master's student nested their master's thesis in their PhD. So at whatever level you are, you can be a mentor. You don't need to have a PhD to become a mentor. You can support somebody else. You might be doing your master's, but there's somebody with a first degree who is actually interested in, bring them on board under your wings. There's something you can teach them. And when you do that, then you begin to learn how to do this right from the beginning. Recognize that excellence is a choice, and you have to make that choice consistently. One thing I learned in my early career is that credibility is something you gain spoonful, one spoon at a time. You lose it bucketful. You make one turn, you plagiarize something and somebody does it and that paper is retracted, you can lose your job. And that could be one single little turn. So make that choice to be excellent in what you do. Make it consistently. It is a choice that you can make. Embrace what you do. Love it. You're doing a PhD, you're working on a particular topic, love that. Talk about it with passion. Know that you're interested in it. Let people see that you actually care about this thing that you're working. You're not just doing it to get a PhD. You're not just doing it to get money or to get promotion. You care about what you're doing. And when you truly, truly care about that, nobody pushes you to wake up in the morning to do it. You get up in the ideas are coming in, and you are able to draw on those ideas and do a lot more. Excuse me. Choose your advisors and committee wisely. And I don't want to say a lot more on that, but choose your advisors. And sometimes it is better to work with a senior lecturer or a reader who is still looking for the next position and all that and care about publications than a professor emeritus who is looking for retirement and not even bothered about the next publication. If you have not published in the last 5 years, maybe they're not the people you want to learn from. And think about it. Sometimes they're the big names in that field and they can open doors for you. But you also need guidance and mentorship and interest for them to be interested in your work. So balance those. If you have a committee, yes, you can have those, but have somebody else with the technical skills you want to learn, with the substantive areas you really want to grow in. Choose your committees very well. I think it can make a difference. Make the sacrifices you can make it now, and don't be afraid of failure. I think if you're not, I said something yesterday to people that, the things that we regret the most are the things we don't do, not the things we do and we fell in, because you did it anyway, so you don't regret it. So don't regret it. And the last point is really to quit complaining. We can complain all we like, it doesn't solve any problem. But the moment we start to take action to change the situation around us, then we begin to see results and things begin to change. So bring a positive disposition to yourself and to the work you're doing. It will change a whole lot of things around you. I think for us, these are some of the things that I feel as a doctoral student, if you begin to apply them in your work and all that, it might begin to open certain doors for you. In conclusion, I've talked about the centrality of African scholarship to our development. You really cannot overemphasize that. It is very critical. It is very important. And true scholarship must be rooted in and draw from your rich African experience. Sometimes I tell people, if I read your paper and you're an African and I can't tell from that paper that you're an African, your research is meaningless. People may not want to publish it in that journal and all of those because they don't understand what you're talking about. But you don't have to write like them in order to get published. There are, your research has to draw on those experiences that you have, on the issues that you understand so many times. And, I've had those issues. Some of the papers that I consider some of my best written papers may not have been published in journals. But what difference does it make? I still talk about them because I believe that they create new knowledge in many different ways. African governments and institutions must recapture the agenda and drive it through local investments in research. There is no way for us to change move forward as a country, as a continent, and if we ignore research in this global knowledge economy. And African universities and research institutes have an obligation to lead in this effort. For young scholars, I think you can decide not to be part of the solution. And part of what you can do is to drive these types of things. I've talked about some of the things that people can do to be able to facilitate discussions and facilitate this national dialogue and conversation around local investments in research and development. If we can't get that done, then it becomes increasingly challenging to be able to do to support graduate training and scholarship in Nigeria or anywhere else in Africa. We have to be able to catalyze those local investments in research and development. I think that's what I wanted to say, and then we can open it up for conversations, discussions, or questions if there's any. Thank you.
Well, for those of you who are here, yes. Thank you so much, Professor Alex. Please, we have some distinguished people here that we just want them to speak very briefly, so I don't want to waste time. We have the Executive Secretary of ARUA, Professor John Yampon, who is a former Vice Chancellor. Prof, please, if you can unmute. We'll also be visiting you very soon, and we'll also be inviting him to speak to the postgraduate board. Please, can you hear me on mute, Professor John? For his comment, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir. Please, go ahead, sir.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to listen to Alex speak on a very important issue, which I'm very passionate about myself. Excuse me, I have a bad cold, and I was double tasking, so I didn't hear everything that he necessarily said. But I just wanted to say that as institutions, we need to try and pick the low-hanging fruits and see what it is that we can do ourselves. When I was Vice Chancellor, I got my council to approve that 5% of all the university's resources, internally generated funds that came in from fees and whatever, should be hived aside to support research and development at the university level. This is because this is what I thought we could have control over. The National Research Fund was not necessarily coming through. And there are many other structures that are in place supposedly to provide resources for research, but they don't really reach where the rubber meets the road. So I believe that we can make an impact by trying to ensure that we do something at the level where we are. So if OAU is not doing it already, I would strongly recommend that OAU could commit a certain proportion of your resources to fund research and development yourself. And that one, nobody has control over. And you can decide what your priorities are. When the fund from the national level comes, then you thank God and do many more things. But you can plan with your own resources that you can generate so that you can support your graduate students, you can support young faculty to do more cutting edge research that can impact society. I wish you well. I wish the young academics well, and I hope that you will all be in line for faculty position very soon and help OAU and other universities in Nigeria and probably other parts of Africa to grow in the next 10 years. I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Prof. We are looking forward to hosting you too. And thanks so much. We appreciate that. Yes, we have online Professor Obadiora Adebayo. Please, we want you to make your other question or remark very brief, 1 minute, maximum 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, sir. I want to quickly appreciate the speaker, our DPC research, the provost and deputy provost. I want to appreciate you for this wonderful occasion. Please, I just want to request for the recorded material of the lecture so that we can use it for those of our PG students who are unable to join this seminar. I don't know if you can make it available for us, sir.
It's on YouTube. Every program we've had on research by the university through the Central Office of Research is available on YouTube.
Okay, sir.
And you can check the chat box for the link. There are many recorded lectures, workshops like this that we have on that YouTube. So please share it with your postgraduate students.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Temisola Oyelakin. If it's the Temisola I know, he must also be a demographer. So I think Professor Alex is always a demographer. Are you asking for total fertility rate now? What rate are you asking for? Temisola, you want to speak? He said, how do we try to balance mentoring under different mentors? Whose skills are key to your career growth, but you find it difficult to balance all due to commitment from the diverse quarters? Yes, sir. Maybe just respond to.
Okay. I think that's really the point about putting your advice on committee members wisely. And the most important thing really is to understand every person that you're inviting to your committee, what is it that they are bringing? And you can tap into that and draw on those specific interests that you have with that person. Maybe this person is a methodologist. So if there are questions around methods that you're applying, you may want to consult with this person and talk with them in details and then get those sorted out. And if you have contradictory feedbacks and all that, you can go back to the same person and make sure that you can resolve them and they can help you through those. The other thing to think about in terms of mentors, actually, who may not be, you're not a PhD student or you have different people that are mentoring you. If you're in a mentoring relationship, I think it's to define What is it that you're looking to gain from this mentor? And many times, we think that once we're in a mentoring relationship, the mentor should be thinking about you 24/7 and doing this and doing that. To be honest with you, mentors are also, if they are good, they are very busy. You have to make your issues important for them. You have to be the one to reach out and ask questions, seek for audience, set up appointments, and all of those. Get on their calendar so that you can get what you want. Is the more you put into those mentoring relationships, is the what you get out of it. If you let it go for a year, by the time you're coming back, they are trying to figure out where you were and all of those. So mentors should not be the ones chasing you. And in essence, I feel that if you choose carefully and wisely who you use as mentors, and if you are able to make more proactive efforts to look for them and to work with them, you will get what you need out of every single mentor. If they accepted to mentor you, then they are committed to your success generally. And for the PhD training, I think choosing your committees wisely, I would say, is one of the best ways you can avoid any conflicts in feedbacks that you might be getting from them.
Thank you, sir. I just want to recognize 3 people, please, for your questions, comments, please. Try to stick to 1 minute because we need to close very soon. I will recognize in the discourse section, let me say Professor Frank White. Please, Professor Frank White, please just want to introduce yourself and ask a question. Then I will call on Professor Morelli Telfon. Then one of Professor Alex Menti, Professor Adibini, with the current Dean of Social Sciences at the Federal University of Yale. So in that quick succession, I think if you greet Alex too much, I will stop you. Thank you. So Professor Frank White, open the Adibini. That's
So check if there are doctors that have questions.
okay, then. Okay.
Maybe you're
Frank
muted.
White.
Maybe you're muted.
Sorry.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, yes, please. We can hear you. 1 minute, please.
All right. Great to see a very great demographer, a mentor, Professor Alex Eze. It's really great to see you, and also Professor Akanyaki Emir, receiving Professor Alex Eze. So I would have loved to be there in person, but due to exigencies at work, actually promised that I will be there, but unfortunately I couldn't come physically. So well done for the great work you are doing in terms of mentoring. More grace and more strength to all of you over there. Maybe just one question, Professor Eze, listening to your presentation. So I would like to ask, kindly just from your wealth of experience, share with us, because you talked about the need to build very strong collaboration. And that's what we've been trying to do, but it's quite challenging from your vast experience over the years. The one thing is to build and then keep the collaboration, keep it, sustain it. Could you just please share your experience in terms of how you've been able to do this over the years, building vast network, collaboration across country, north, south, and then you're able to sustain it for so long, particularly for upcoming researchers, mid and early career researchers, because that is the way to go in terms of ensuring that one goes far. If you want to go far, you go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. So please share with us. Thank you very much. And over.
Just to remark that Adibini is one of the analysis that he's so proud of. But do we have any doctoral students online? Because this is really for you listen to the introduction that the Professor Alex said, so the what is value, so what is the value for this PhD? So we are here for you. Any doctoral students who wants to, please feel free. Do not be intimidated by the professor we are calling. Any doctoral students? Okay. Oh, Frank, we already calling you Professor Frank. You are a professor. So I will give your question to Professor Alexis. Yeah, if we have other doctoral students here for you, you can send them questions or you can ask. Professor, maybe you answer this first before you go to the debate.
Okay. Okay, the question says, I'm a PhD student. I presently have challenge of funding. How can I ensure that I do not drop out as a result of money constraints? I had thought that the seminar was to teach us how we can go about something like this. Okay, thank you. First of all, I don't know at what level you are as a PhD student, if you have, what year you're in, but you have a committee, you have an advisor, and I think the first thing to do would be to discuss with your advisor and your head of department. And I don't know how you've been supported so far. Those are the things I actually wanted to gauge at the beginning to see how people who are doing their PhD here are supported, because then you can tailor the conversation in a way that meets the needs of most of the students. At this point, if everybody is fully funded, you don't want to talk about how you raise funds for your PhD and all that. If nobody is funded for their PhD, then that might become an important conversation to have. It's almost another presentation altogether. How do you raise money and do for anything? I mean, the ways you raise money for research or for training or for a building and all that, there are strategies and principles people follow. But I think for you as a student here, your department, your faculty, your advisor are key resources that you need to be able to talk with. And if everything is not falling in place, come meet your DVC research and then see what else are there and opportunities. I think sometimes there are resources that are even within universities that we are not aware of. I really like what John Japon shared earlier about universities putting aside some part of their internally generated funds to support research. And one of the things I've challenged universities to do in doing that is not just to give people $500 here and there just to go for a conference. You can use it and define 2-3 critical areas you want scholarship to focus on for a period of time. And you put a large portion of that resource into those areas and make calls for competitive collaborative research around those. And then you realize that your little money you're putting, even if it is 5%, that is actually creating new knowledge and seeding new ideas that people can then build upon to get external resources. These things, I mean, at APHRC, we started something we call a knowledge bank, where if you have an idea, write a 2-3 page concept note, we'll review it. If there is no opportunity for funding, we keep it aside. Tomorrow or in a year's time, you see another opportunity. You're not starting from zero. You actually pull it out from there, and you're already ahead in that proposal. The second thing we are doing is to say every year we give seed money for people who have ideas they want to pursue. $10,000 here, $20,000 there, and you fund 10 of those. And before you know it, those $10,000 investments may be leading to a $100,000 grant, $500,000 grant. So you need to invest to really facilitate and support research in this sense. To Sunday's question, I think it's a whole different presentation, but one point to make is if you want to do sustain collaborations, the most important thing for you to do is to believe in yourself. That you're coming into any collaboration, you're coming with something. You're bringing something to that partnership. I know people used to think, who are you at APHS that you say you cannot work on proposals that you've not been part of? Because we made a decision when we were nothing, when we had nothing, that if you come to us as a partner and you already have a full proposal or a funded project, we will not work on it because we don't want to be glorified research assistants. We said, if we are not, if you knew we existed, if you wanted us to be part of it, you come to us at the initial stage and we conceptualize the ideas together, we work together on the proposal, we define what our needs are and all that. And I find people who are interested in those ideas. So when the research is done, the data collection is done, these people are motivated to continue to work on that because they have questions that they want to answer using that data. So there are things we can do that can actually facilitate partnerships. And the most important is to know yourself and to understand and appreciate the value you are bringing to every partnership. Don't cheapen yourself. Don't make it like they are doing you a favor by collaborating with you. Don't follow the money. There is nothing more liberating for a researcher than to be able to say no to money. People bring money to you, say, no, we're not interested in that. We can't work that way. Tomorrow, when they are coming back to you, they are coming differently. They are coming with a different approach and all that. So I think these things are things we don't talk about much. And many times when we are looking for the money by all means, then we can do anything. And people think we can do anything, then they don't think about you as a partner like that. They think you as a data collector and all of those. And that's not the way to build strong, equitable research partnerships.
Thank you so much, sir. Monica, we saw your questions. We saw your question, Monica, and let me say that we will send your email so that what I'm looking for is how to just have a plan to get that finish in 2026. So it will be difficult and she raised a lot of issues. But because of time, we will not really discuss that now. But we engage you. Suppose I would like to share a partner experience between this. It's okay. Monica, Professor Alex will reply. You send your email, and I will find a way to connect you. Ramota Rasad, you are asking question for platform. Let me say that as a nation, it would not be fair to say that we are not doing anything. I think government is started something. The second question is what they are doing enough. I think no. But as Prof rightly mentioned, we have the IBR, we have the NRF from TEFON. As Prof rightly mentioned, look for mentors who can apply for those things. 9 years at the university, whatever grant we are applying for, and make sure that I put my PhD students there, even PhD from other departments, master from other departments. Well, that's the only way for you to learn. And there are also difficult opportunities that we can be proud of. I would have been part of those. But again, learn from what Postgraduate said, one of the slides, the last sentence. Then we should stop complaining. Because at times when you invest your time in complaining, you don't see opportunities around you. There are opportunities. They may not be so much, but there are opportunities. So please look for opportunities around you. There are opportunities with TEFON. But again, it's not a free gift. You have to apply, you have to compete. All the things that Alex has done at AP Council, they are not free gifts. People apply out of the 100, maybe you shortlist 10 people. So it's not saying that there are free meal, there are no free meal. You also have to apply. So the last question I will take now will be from Professor Michael. I will lay you.
My Kata fellow too.
Oh, there's a Kata fellow here. Don't mind because from the I just say Kata fellow. Kata, there was a man. You did the
I need to allow it. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, sir.
And I'm particularly grateful for this opportunity to also host our mentor, Professor Alex Eze. Thank you for all that you have mentioned. I listened keenly and I discovered that there's this truth that we don't want to admit, and that is the fact that there's a gap between the gowns and the town. And this is because we have not been making the impact that we are supposed to make in the national development. Having said that, sir, I am speaking on behalf of the early career and middle career researchers because there seems to be the missing gap or the neglected gap in that process. You know, we talk about the doctoral students, talk about the postdoctoral students. But for early career researchers, especially when it's about 5 years that you have finished your doctoral training, you know, to actually get funding, you know, to continue your work might be quite difficult. And also, if you're not doing I'm talking about for international funders now, if you're not doing what they are actually interested in, they may not. And we also talk about onshore, offshore publications. When we do some studies that actually address our own problem, indigenous problems, we may not get them published in Scopus in Elsevier that we always advocate for. I want to ask, sir, how do we as early career researchers, middle career researchers, some of us don't even have sponsorship for our doctoral, not everybody had sponsorship for doctoral. And so they're just left in the cold there, no mentorship, you know, because by the virtue of the fact that they're not sponsored, you know, they don't have funding for their postdoctoral, they don't even have the mentorship that some of us had with Kata. I want to ask, sir, how do we navigate that space and still take care of them? Because our postdoctoral, our doctoral students are also going to rely on them. And what you don't have, you can't give, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Prof. Sir, for your beautiful presentation. I'm quite home with the presentation and some of the parameters you have currently presented to us, especially the gross expenditure on R&D for a number of countries and all of that you mentioned, and as it relates to Africa and some SSA, sub-Saharan African countries. I noticed that you also reported that as well, that Nigeria is getting better as it has to do with increasing our GDP, DRD for research and development. We actually started about less than 1%, but I think you reported about 1.7 now, 1.6, 1.7 now. Now, but the question now is this. We also have evidences of government providing fundings for research institutions through NRF and a number of things that Professor Kanye also mentioned. But you find out that in the national innovation system, while the academia are actually playing their role, the government also playing their role. You rarely find the industry, forming the synergy that is expected in the national innovation system. So, but most of the time what they report or what they say or claim is that the kind of researches we carry out in academia is not what they really want. And one of the reasons why we send students out from the university to go for industrial training is to look at what goes on in the industry. So that when they come back, we can then come together and then look for solutions that we presented to the industry. When you find that we have done this for years, yet the private industries, they still prefer to work with their multinationals to give them solutions from other universities outside Nigeria, even though they are residents here. So that kind of a thing, how do we synergize to ensure that the national innovation system is actually, because without the national innovation system working, all the stakeholders, playing their roles as expected, you cannot get that. The emerging economies is not like that with them. The developed countries also is not like that with them. We have a number, even in South Africa here, there are a number of professorial chairs that emanated from the industries that they give to professors in university to work on a number of things. We rarely have that in Nigeria. So in that case, what do we have to do? What do we have to do differently to be able to get this result we are talking about? Fortunately, in this part of the okay, sir. Well, all right. Let me quickly round off there. Let me so that we can. Ordinarily, the point I was going to make is in Nigeria, in OAU here, and a few other institutions, we have a number of IPTTO's offices that are apparently, making efforts to ensure that they synergize with the industry. But yet, the industry, yet they are not really responsive as expected. So this is what I'm pushing for. So what do we have to do? Thank you.
Yeah, okay, please. Make it very brief.
Yeah. Just an addition to what you have said. It's not only TED Fund that is the platform for which government is funding research in Nigeria. There's also the raw materials, yes, Research and Development Council that they are now helping to push out fund from the government side so that there can be a kind of development value addition to raw materials in Nigeria. It only depends on the university that's taking advantage of this opportunity. The opportunity is there for us to take advantage of. Yeah, that's government side.
Okay, thank you. I think these are all excellent questions, and if we had more time, we will get deeper into them to discuss them. But in terms of the early career researchers, I think that's why if you look at the Qatar program, it's not just about producing the PhDs, it's also supporting them through postdoctoral awards, reentry grants, and different things, and supporting the supervisors and mentors, and so that they're able to have an environment to thrive when they get back into the university. And the goal is that when you come in here now, let's say you see more than 30 Qatar fellows at OAU, you create a network that you can actually have people you collaborate with who've gotten similar levels of skills and training and exposures and all that. And you can create a formidable force that can change a lot of those things. You can attract grants that will then support some of these others that you can work with and support. But every single university would have to figure out ways to ensure they empower their junior faculty. In many universities in the global north, if you're an assistant professor, if there is a departmental funding, it is the sort of you're more likely to get them if you're an assistant professor than if you're a full professor. If there is departmental funding for a PhD student, it will go to a PhD student working with a junior faculty, so that is a way to contribute to their research and supporting them and all that. I think we have to create that it's almost some level of equity lens that you're bringing into those, how you use your domestic resources that you have, so that you're supporting younger researchers and scientists and encouraging them. One of the things we may not be doing right is thinking because these people are young and they're new, we give them a lot more classes to teach and more students to supervise, then we're actually telling them that we don't care about their moving forward in research. So there are a lot of things heads of departments, deans can do, lessening the burden on them so that they can spend more time in research and grow their career. But in terms of the external funding, I think part of the strategy will be becoming part of research active groups and colleagues who are doing research in your area. Figure out how do you partner with them and bring some value to what they are doing and collaborate with them. And that way you begin to learn those ropes. And I think that's, for me, there is no better way. One of the ways we did this, they continue to do it, is to bring the postdocs and the research assistants into proposal development. So they see this and you get an opportunity, you ask them to do the first draft, you work with them until they get to a point where you know that this is good to be submitted. And the senior people support the junior ones, and they work together to get it. And if you do that, definitely your proposal is no longer one person trying to compete with a team that is at another university with all the support systems that they have. So I think that's really important. In terms of how we can, what, at the, the funding that might be available here, and how, as a country, you've made the important point that the industry is not well connected. I think if I look at my university, for instance, they have almost 180 years or so of experience in cooperative education, where people come in and they've mastered this, where they work with maybe 5,000 plus companies across the US and globally, where they can send students for corporate, where we call it co-ops, cooperative training and education. And so it doesn't matter what field they are in, they can go anywhere. And by the time they are graduating, many of these are getting back into positions of jobs and all that. And there is something to be said. For you to do that, you also need to see how do you adapt your academic programs in such a way that it supports those types of experiences when students are out there. And you also realize that they say 70% of our economy are in the informal sector. And if we are looking at those small formal sector players to play that role, of course, some of them might, but we all, if I think about the US, part of what has happened is creating incentives. The government can create incentives that the investments you make in universities and all that could be tax deductible for companies or for individuals and all that. But in many countries, we really don't have those, where if you make a huge investment here, that you can write it as a company, you can actually write it off of your taxes and all that. Of course, many of them don't even pay taxes, but that's a different story altogether. But I think that, one of the things I suggested in terms of the way forward is thinking about how do we connect our research to industry and to prototype. And sometimes it might be that we might start some of those ideas and create that value that they will see. There was a program when I left the PHRC that we sort of initiated, and trying to work with the African Development Bank to create this knowledge and capacity development fund for Africa. And part of it is to not just fund research, but support the entire ecosystem of research, how you recognize and protect patents, and how you create opportunities for people to test out those ideas that you're coming up. And so it's not just remaining in papers and all those, and bringing industries to see those innovations and the patents and see how can you partner with them to take it to market in some way. So there are a lot of thinking around that, and there are a lot of ways that universities can actually play a role in facilitating that. I think the key is to help our local industries, especially those that are local and the multinationals that are here, see the value we bring to them. And if they have a corporate social responsibility fund that they can use to support some of those partnerships, it might be something that could be leveraged. But ultimately, as I'm hearing, the federal government is making some investments in this area to support research. I think we should leverage whatever is there and come up with the ideas that can then go on to the next phase of working with the private sector. Let's maximize what we can do with the available resources that are there, and then explore with the output of those research how we can engage further with the private sector. And I think you're already doing a great job by identifying some people that you're already working with in some areas around those. So I think at the end of the day, it's the strategy that you have in place for engagement in these places that will break those barriers that may be currently there. And if you have that strategy, one of the things you can do, for example, convene a meeting of the top CEOs of these people, do it in Lagos or in Abuja, not here, and come in and share what you are doing and all that. And even if they come in, you only get 10 of them. They begin to see that actually there are opportunities here. How do they know what you're doing at IFE if you don't actually write them, invite them, have a dinner event with them where these things are discussed and shared? There might be different other strategies, but coming together, you can actually come up with very concrete plans on how you might be able to connect with those industry players.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we can again do better by sincerely appreciating Professor Alex. I want to hand over to the provost to make a quick remark, then also to do the presentation.
Thank you very much, DVC. Thank you so very much, guest speaker, Professor Alex Eze. So many points that you gave to us. We like to do research by doing it, not just by teaching it. And the knowledge economy is boundless. From henceforth, we hope to be able to tap into that boundless knowledge economy. You've given us some wonderful ideas about what you did back there at the APHRC, the Knowledge Bank, seed money for ideas, and so on. And you've given quite some very valuable tips to our doctoral students and to those of us who want to emphasize collaboration, about not cheapening ourselves and not following the money. And all of this will take to heart and begin to put them into practice. And thank you also for responding to all of the questions that have been asked both by online contributors and those of us who are here. And likewise also want to thank all of our online and virtual participants for making it a very lively and insightful session. So once again, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Let me thank the rest of the panel, particularly our DVC Research Innovation and Development. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Director of the Central Office of Research and the Deputy Provost. Thank you. Our cut-up, Professor Ma, we thank you so much. Dr. Wole, thank you very much. And this is not the last meeting. This is just the beginning of our interaction with Professor Eze, and there are still other sessions today and tomorrow, even right up to Thursday. So on that note, I say thank you to everyone.
Well, I think the provost has given the vote of thanks, but I'm supposed to give the vote of thanks. Well, on behalf of the Central Office of Research, Bafemelo University, we want to sincerely thank Professor Alex Eze for giving us part of his holiday and spending it with us. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. All that you have said, I am sure that we are taking them to heart, and then by the next time that you are coming, you will see, an improvement in what we are doing and how we are doing it. So, on behalf of the university, the Vice Chancellor, I think I should be on my feet saying this now because I'm speaking on behalf of the university, Vice Chancellor, my DVC, Research Innovation and Development, and then COR as a whole. I want to thank you for coming and for giving us this time. Thank you. And to everyone who attended online, I know there are more than 139 people online who are attending, students and also researchers. And then the Arua team, thank you for attending. We are so proud of you that you are doing a good work there. So thank you. So to everyone who attended also, thank you. So next time we'll let you know. Normally we have just saying this, every Friday we have a seminar, and every of these seminars, including this, they are recorded and then on the YouTube channel of the COR. So you can go there and then access them and then make good use of them. Thanks. So I say goodbye to everyone for attending. Thank you. Okay.